So, kia ora, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to our global community tuning in from around the world. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar aimed at providing practical advice for returning to New Zealand. My name is Natalie, I'm Kia's Marketing Engagement Manager, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Joining me today are our panel speakers from Christchurch NZ, Crown Relocation, and a recently returned member of our community. Some quick housekeeping before we start. This webinar will be recorded and shared on our website and social channels, along with all the handy links from our panelists today that we refer to throughout the webinar. Throughout the webinar, please also send through any questions you have using the Q&A function, as we will have some time allocated at the end to answer these for you. Any questions that we can't address today, we will do our best to answer afterwards. Otherwise, we'll look to hold other webinars where we can help answer those questions as well. As a bit of background, Kia is a non-for-profit organisation that was founded more than 20 years ago to help connect Kiwi all across the globe. Today, the Kia community consists of around 500,000 members living in 185 countries. Kia works to connect our global Kiwi community to each other and back to New Zealand. And we support Kiwi export businesses looking to grow globally by connecting them with our community to offer in-market advice and experience. We also work to support our returning Kiwi community who are looking to bring their global learnings and expertise back to Aotearoa. Which brings us to our webinar today, where we'll be answering some key questions around returning to New Zealand. So joining us on our panel, first up we have Ali Adams from Christchurch NZ. Christchurch NZ is the city's sustainable economic development agency, whose role is to promote Christchurch nationally and globally to people who want to do business, invest, study and live. Next on our panel, we have Lucy, a member of our Kia community, who recently returned to Christchurch after living in the UK for 10 years. And finally, we have Kerry James from Crown Relocations. Crown Relocations is one of New Zealand's leading domestic and international moving companies who can take care of everything from packing, shipping, storage to pet relocation, schools and lifestyle advice, immigration and long-term accommodation. So today we're going to start with the topic of preparing to leave. Many of our offshore Kiwi have been living overseas for a number of years and might be looking to return from anywhere within 6 months to the next 2 years. So Ali, when our offshore Kiwi community are planning to return to New Zealand and are trying to decide where they might like to live, what information is available to help them understand more about the different regions in New Zealand that they might be considering?
Thanks, Natalie, and thanks very much for having me. I hope you're all having a good day or evening, whatever time it is for you. As Christchurch NZ is our economic development agency for Christchurch, there are economic development agencies across the whole country, and they generally do very similar jobs to us. So one of the things that they'll be working on is trying to give really useful, practical information to returners so that they can make good decisions about where is the right place for them. We're all very aware that there's lots of choice. So if you go to the Christchurch NZ website, I'll talk about Christchurch because obviously that's where I know best, but you will find wherever you choose to go in the country that there would be very similar resources available. And we'll put all the websites details up at the end. But for example, if you click on the Christchurch NZ section around moving to Christchurch, you'll see that there are sections around housing, where to choose to live, which type of suburb might suit the kind of things that you're after. That might include things like school zones, it might include lifestyle things that might be important to you. And it won't just include the Christchurch City Council region, it might also include some of the suburbs, because obviously you might choose to live a little bit further out and commute into the town. It will also include information about the types of jobs and careers that you can find and who might be the good recruitment consultants that you can link up with, and also lots of lifestyle resources as well. And we've also got on our site quite a lot of testimonials from people who've actually done this, and they can be really great because They can they're genuine, real people that have really done this in the not too distant past, and they can often give a really interesting insight. They've all got slightly different perspectives. I mean, for Christchurch, if you're looking at coming to Christchurch, unashamed plug for the fabulous city that we have here. Some of the things that we talk about as being our big benefits are that we're a 20-minute city. You can ski in the morning and surf in the afternoon, and we're literally 20 minutes from the international airport. We have a really good balance between career and lifestyle. And actually, we have a lot of people who've done what you're about to do, which is return here from somewhere else. So there are lots of people that are looking to create new communities and new sets of friends. So yeah, go to your economic development agency, wherever you're interested in the country, and they will have a lot of free resources and be able to point you in the right direction.
Thanks, Ali. That's really great advice. So Lucy, how did you know that it was the right time for you to move back home? And how long did it take you from when you decided to return to actually leaving?
Great, thanks, Natalie. I think obviously the decision is different for everybody. It's such a personal decision as to why you might want to make the move across the world or halfway across the world, depending on where you're coming from. For me personally, was family. I've still got my sort of elderly parents, although they're wouldn't like me describing them that way, I think, who they're fitting well. And so being closer to them for me was a big draw card. My husband is doing a PhD at the University of Canterbury, so got that position, which really tied him into wanting to come back as well. He's from the North Island, so it wasn't too far, but he got a great opportunity as a scholarship there to study. So I think we knew it was the right time because some of those building blocks kind of fell into place. And I'd been at my job in London for 9 years and sort of thinking, you know, do I want to find a new job here and move on, or do we want to make the move? So, you know, that all happened for us quite personally, but I've got lots of friends who have all returned for all different reasons. You know, obviously family isn't, a lot of people don't have family here. They might be thinking of moving anyway. So that is kind of a personal decision, I think. But one of the things that, and we talked about before when we were talking about this, was getting a job in advance really helped as well. So I talked to lots of recruiters, plenty of recruiters that are really happy to help overseas people come back to anywhere in New Zealand. Overseas experience is really valued. And I found that process really easy. You might not know the market, so you are trusting a recruiter on the ground for you. You might not really know in your industry who the players are. So if you find someone that you trust, that you will help you with that, going through that process helped as well, because I had a job to come back to, which made that decision a little bit easier. I think time frame from actually deciding to go and then actually going for me was really, really long, partly because COVID was a bit of a factor and we wanted to not miss out on Freedom Day. We'd done a lot of lockdown in the UK, and then it was sort of coming to an end, and we thought we're not going to go through all these lockdowns and miss out on the big party. So we actually pushed our leaving date out. We finished work in the March, and we spent 7 or 8 months traveling around the UK and doing a bit more travel and things like that. And you know, it's quite common for people to do some big trips on the way back here or wherever they're going. So what I found is that employers were really happy to be flexible on timeframes, especially with a little bit of the international travel situation. They were saying, you know, come back when you can, but we understand that it might be a bit of a longer time frame than actually deciding you want to go and being on a plane the next week. It doesn't really work like that for a lot of people, and people seem really understanding of that.
Oh, that's good to know. And yeah, great that you got to experience a bit of travel and yeah, sort of time off in between, which is, yeah, it's really important as well to make the most of that. So Ali, a lot of our Kiwi have owned successful businesses overseas or might be looking to start up new ventures when they get here. So what advice and support is available for those people looking to perhaps bring a business to New Zealand or establish a new offering?
So I don't want to repeat myself and say that all roads lead to your economic development agency website, but they kind of do when you're coming back. So we're looking at attracting people to come back and live here, but we are also looking as an economic development agency to attract businesses to set up in our region. What I would say is have a really good look what each region offers. It depends which sector that your business is in. So often regions will have sectors of specialization. So for example, in Christchurch, we have 4 sectors where we're really strong and we're looking to really attract businesses. So things like aerospace, food, fibre and agri-tech. We have an Antarctic Gateway program here and also health tech. So if you're a business in those particular sectors, then there's a link on our website. You can literally come straight through to our business attraction advisor, who's a guy called Jamie. Most of the other regions will have something similar. Now, it doesn't mean we're only attracting businesses in those sectors. We're interested in helping all businesses, but it does mean that we might actually have a bit more momentum and easier connections to set you up there. Again, have a look for some case studies online. There's quite a lot of case studies about what people have found useful or different for each of the different regions. Again, for Christchurch, we've got 4 tertiaries, so you've got good access to skills, although that is a constant struggle in the post-COVID era. But we've also got, for example, information on our website about the innovation ecosystem. So depending on where you are, if you're a startup or if you're looking to scale up, we can point you in the right direction for some support. Now, that support might be an incubator or an accelerator, or it might be funding. And if you don't fit into that, we can help you with other things, such as the central government business mentors and regional business partners program. So there's lots of different things available. Some of it's funding, not a lot of it. We tend to not have really very deep pockets. It's local government, but a lot of it is connections and advice. We can advise you on the best places to set up and the right types of premises, and put you in touch with other industry people. So yeah, there's lots out there. Don't be afraid to ask, would be my piece of advice. There are plenty of people wanting to help you, and if you're bringing a business to a region, then you are valuable. So don't underestimate that. So what we don't do, I should just mention, and I would hope that this would not happen elsewhere much in the country, is we don't offer large scale funding incentives to buy people to come to the region. And that's very deliberate because we want to think about what's best for NZ Inc. rather than racing each other to the bottom.
Thanks, Ali. Yeah, that's really helpful to know that there are, plenty of resources available for businesses. So, yeah, just encourage anyone to, reach out to the different regions and access that support, which, yeah, there is plenty of it. So, Kerry, if we turn to you now, once people have actually made that decision to leave and they start thinking about what they're going to bring back with them, what are the sort of general options for moving their belongings?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Natalie. I guess that first consideration, as you touched on there, is really what they're going to bring with them and how much. And that will really dictate the most practical option for you. So there's a few different scenarios. If, for example, you are looking at just relocating some extra clothes and a few cartons or an extra suitcase, realistically, excess baggage is kind of going to be the better option for you. It's going to get here straight away. It's not the more expensive option anymore. And it's really practical, although it can be a little bit more arduous going through the airport. If you've got a little bit more than that and the thought of carrying those extra items is too much, there are also unaccompanied excess baggage companies available. And that might be if you've got sort of more than those 2 or 3 boxes, but still really only personal effects. Once you're getting more than a few cartons, that's where you really want to start speaking to a professional relocation company. Okay. Now, those are the companies who have usually a lot of infrastructure, so they're able to send people in and do the packing for you. They can store things if you need them to store them, and they would have contacts on the ground here in New Zealand who would provide a door-to-door service for you. So it's really, really important to understand what it is you want to ship. And when you're making that decision as well, think about all of the practicalities. So if you have, for example, all of your winter clothing, you're going to need that by a certain time of year. So it's really important to speak to your relocation company about your different options. within those three options that I've described, there's also a whole lot of different shipping methods as well. So you have what they refer to as a shared container or a groupage shipment, where your goods would be consolidated with others. And so those can take a bit of extra time. They're lower cost. And so if that's your priority and you want to prepare for that, fantastic, as long as you're making sure that you're emotionally and practically prepared for those delays. And then, you know, it's important just to discuss those different options and the different implications, especially at the moment. Yeah, so timing is probably one of the biggest things to be mindful of and be aware of when considering those options, as well as the company that you're dealing with and being comfortable with them. So making sure that you know what to look for in a company and in a proposal, and making sure that the service that you're going to receive at both ends is consistent and of the same standard.
Great. Well, that's really good to know, Kerry, and to keep in mind. When I returned back to New Zealand, we packed up all of our camping equipment, which obviously didn't arrive until winter. So we arrived at the start of summer with nothing, basically. So yeah, those sort of little bits of insight from a relocation expert really help you to sort of like think and plan ahead as well. So Lucy, when it comes to the actual process of packing up, how did you personally decide what to bring and what to leave behind?
I was lucky enough that my new company were giving me a relocation bonus, incentives and money. I think a lot of companies will do that to try and make it attractive to come to where you are. But I think even if that wasn't happening, my recommendation would be to bring it all. Because you sort of end up, if you have to completely start again, it can be quite expensive in New Zealand to buy everything. With the recent kind of worldwide trade issues, some of the supply chains have been a little bit slower in New Zealand. They will be going forward, so hopefully this experience will have been in the past anyway. But especially furniture, if you can put it all into a container, and don't worry, and it doesn't matter about the time or anything, as Kerry said, you've got different options, but we put everything in a shared container, and really we're glad that we did, because it just meant that when we got a short-term flat, we had a couch, we had a bed, we had a mattress, I think we bought some pillows, but we didn't have to actually go out and buy everything, which would have been quite expensive if you need it all at once, and you can't sort of wait till the sale comes on or take your time and decide how to go. So we made the decision that we would just bring everything. And as Kerry had mentioned, and I think she'll probably talk about in a bit as well, with the packing up process, it was really easy. I've moved apartments or flats, as a lot of people probably have, and you pack it all yourself. It's quite a process. But with the international movals, depending on what service you go for or what, how you're structuring it, for insurance, they come and pack it all up themselves, which was amazing. You just had everything there and they just packed it all up and it disappeared. And so I found the process really, really easy. The thought was different. What was, once you've made that decision and you could get help from lots of people that knew what they were doing, it was actually really easy to just, people came in and everything disappeared. We had our suitcase that we travelled around Scotland for 5 weeks, which was great. And then when we unloaded the container quite a few months later, it felt like Christmas, actually, like, oh, I forgot about this pan, or all these things. So it was really good.
I do remember that feeling of receiving all my shipping items, and feeling like Christmas is exactly how I described it. So Kerry, what are some of the things that people need to be aware of when they are packing up their items to come home?
Yeah, sure. So I think Lucy's really touched on some fantastic points there around, supply chain issues here, difficulty with replacing items. And so if people are considering bringing their full household, as I mentioned, the biggest thing I think is understanding the timeframes and understanding that there can sometimes be delays in shipping. So again, as I mentioned, just that emotional preparation, because it is like Christmas when it gets here, right? It's really exciting and it's hard to be without your things sometimes, especially when you're going through big changes already. But the practical preparation also. So there are solutions around, things like rental furniture, for example, which mean you can move into a permanent home quite quickly. You're not spending a long time in temporary accommodation, which can be expensive and not necessarily as comfortable. You can get the kids into school because you're in the right school zone, all of those things. So making sure that you're really thinking about the timeframes and having a good conversation with your relocation specialist and knowing, that there's someone you can trust to give you good advice. You need to think about the regulatory side of things. So coming into New Zealand, there are, of course, a number of agricultural and customs requirements. So, you will need to declare potentially a lot of items. If you go through a customs declaration, it will ask you, do you have anything made of wood? Well, yes, a lot of us do have things that are made of wood. But those are fine to ship. So again, it's being able to have those conversations, as long as you've bought them in a shop and they've been treated and they don't have bark or things on them, they will be fine to come in. But thinking about any other risk items. So for example, food products, if there are certain food products that are a big no-no, you don't want to bring any honey products in, or meat products ideally, anything that's unsealed. And understanding that any food you do bring in will likely prompt the authorities here to want to inspect your shipment, okay? And ideally, you want to avoid that where you can, because you've gone through this process of having these amazing professional packers come in and pack everything to an international standard, and it's all wonderful and safe and secure, and then John from MPI comes in and unpacks it and repacks it before it's delivered to your home. So you want to avoid those risk situations where you can. So understanding the rules and regulations is really important, and considering what you can and can't ship. In addition, you should really think about the insurance side of things, and Lucy very rightly touched on this as well. So there's two reasons to consider having professional packers come into your home and pack your things. Well, there's three reasons really. One, it's a lot easier and far less stressful than the alternative. Two, you know that there is far less risk of those items actually being inspected, packed by owner. Shipments are often, very thoroughly inspected by the authorities, because there's no one who's been vetting what's gone into those boxes, and there's no inventory recorded of what's in them necessarily. And the other reason is, if you don't go through that process of having items professionally packed, you can't actually get full insurance cover. And so, there's always risk in moving, no matter how well things are packed. There's inherent risk, and so insurance is important. Your relocation provider wants to make sure that you're protected at the end of the day. So that's another really big consideration around that as well.
Great, thank you for that overview. So when people actually arrive in New Zealand, what are some of the things that they need to be aware of?
Yeah, sure. So again, understanding that you're probably going to be without your things for a while. So making sure that you have that practical plan in place. Understanding again how long it takes, and having a plan that will accommodate you if, for example, things are delayed at the last minute. And so that's where those alternate solutions like rental furniture are quite sensible. If you put yourself in that scenario where your shipment was due on the 28th of January, you've signed yourself out of your temporary accommodation, you're moving in to your new home, and then all of a sudden that's delayed, the consequential loss from that is huge. It's huge disruption. You've got to find yourself somewhere else to live, where if you're just having to extend rental furniture, it doesn't matter. So, it's just thinking through those options, how it's going to work for you. If you're staying with family, for example, how long can you do that? Is it practical to be extending a stay there? Are you going to cope in that sort of situation? So preparing for some of the volatility that still exists in that shipping environment. But again, as long as you are prepared, it's fine. Things are improving all of the time. And that's just a really fantastic way to minimize some of the inconvenience that can arise from those types of disruptions. It's also really important to think about what you will need straight away. So we talked about excess baggage right at the outset. I think, it's still worthwhile considering potentially bringing some of those essential items. So if you're coming into a different season, which you probably inevitably would be, making sure that you've thought through to that season and brought appropriate clothing and things with you. Don't sort of turn up with a week's worth of clothes and and think that that's going to see you through, because it probably won't. If there's any special items for your children, special toys that you think will really help them to adjust with the new environment and all of the change that they're going through, bring them with you. And have a look at potentially some of that product accessibility. If there are things you're not sure whether you can get here, ask your relocation provider. They'll usually be able to give you that kind of advice, or fall on an organisation like Ellie's for those sorts of information as well. I think it's just really important to be able to, as I say, speak to someone who knows what they're doing, and try and put a plan together that will minimize all of that disruption that can potentially occur.
Thanks, Kerry. That's really helpful advice. So Ali, you've spent a number of years working overseas. How did you personally find the transition of bringing back your international experience to your organisation in New Zealand?
Just before I do, I just wanted to say, Kerry, honestly, that's bringing back so many kind of memories. I just wanted to say to everyone, you will never remember it all. The packers are so efficient. They'll always pack that one thing that you didn't need them to pack till the end. It'll get packed before you realise, and you'll always forget the one most important thing. So be kind to yourself as well, and leave a little bit of a slush fund for the emergencies things. It just really takes me back to all the little items that I've got 7 of. So how did my advice around transition? Look, I think the key thing is New Zealand's a long way from the rest of the world. We all know that, and it can at times feel a little insular and a little bit detached. And that's probably been slightly enhanced during COVID because of some of the challenges that we faced across the globe. I think that makes your experience of having lived and worked overseas even more valuable than it normally would be. So don't underestimate the value of the perspective that you will bring back. It's crucial. It's crucial for employers. It's crucial in all aspects of your life, because you will have experienced things really differently. But the one thing that I would say is be really thoughtful about how you position that perspective, because particularly again through COVID, everyone's had very different experiences of that global pandemic. Although we were all in it together, my experience, I was in Germany for the first lockdown, the UK for the second lockdown, and then here for the third, and each one was a very different experience. And so be very thoughtful and mindful of that when you're positioning it. My best bit of advice would be to really be curious and listen, and then share your perspective, just so that people don't feel threatened by it, because it can make people feel a little bit defensive, I think, sometimes. But yeah, don't undervalue it. It's crucial. It's something that you will be bringing that will give you an edge in an interview or in a selection process. So talk it up. Most employers are looking for it.
That's great advice, Ali, and something, we really encourage our Kiwi returners to, really sort of work on highlighting their overseas experience and sort of showcasing that, because New Zealand really does need that. But also, as mentioned earlier on the call, working with recruitment agents in New Zealand will help you sort of tweak your experience as well to sort of change some of your skills or expertise to the sort of New Zealand language as well. Is a really sort of helpful service that a lot of recruitment agencies can offer as well. So Lucy, how did you find settling into a new city and maybe making new friends or business connections once you arrived back in Christchurch?
Yes, it definitely takes time. And that was, to repeat a bit of what Ali said, is be kind to yourself when you're going through this process, because it is a big change. You have to build the building blocks of your life up again. Which hairdresser do I go to? Is there a good yoga studio? Where do I get my sushi or sandwiches or whatever it is that you get through the day with? You have to find all those things again. So it's just a case of, I found building up those blocks, and then it just takes time to get them all together. And then all of a sudden you've got somewhere you like to go for a wine or a walk that you like to do, whatever it is you're into in whatever city you're in New Zealand. I can only personally speak from Christchurch, but there's groups that are doing whatever you feel like doing. There'll be a group that is doing that. Obviously lots of outdoor activities, which is something that New Zealand is really proud of, is something that's part of our kind of culture here. So there's always those fun things to do. And it's, I think, about appreciating the positives of the change. It'll be difficult, but for example, my commute has gone from London to, quite an easy commute for London, but there were times when it took an hour just to 4 minutes, which is really great. Sometimes I try and extend that by going for a walk around the park to have a coffee, because it's too quick and all of a sudden I'm at work and I haven't really mentally prepared for it. So there will be lots of different things, but I've found that if you sort of focus on the positives of all the change, it helps you get through. Each city will have some really great groups for people that are new to that city. In Christchurch, we have recently, I went to last week, a New to Christchurch club, which was a lot of professionals that are new to Christchurch in about the last 2 years. And so it's a lot of people that don't have those networks here and those connections here, and to meet up and just, we're sort of working out how it will go, but there might be speakers or breakfast meetings or other people that are new to Christchurch. So there will be other people out there going through the same thing, and it's about reaching out and finding your group of people that are doing the same things that you like to do, or going through the same thing, and you might find through work or through friends. But there's definitely, if you look for people that are going through or doing what you're doing, I think you'll definitely find that wherever you end up in New Zealand. If maybe if you're in a really tiny little town with only 50 people, which we do have, it might be difficult, it might be more difficult, but I still think you'd make connections with people wherever you are if you look for them.
Yeah, that's really great advice, and thank you for sharing your experience, Lucy. I think that's definitely one thing we sort of say to our returners, and we've talked about it on one of our previous webinars as well, is just preparing for those sort of like highs and lows of when you relocate somewhere. You've obviously got the honeymoon period when you first arrive and you're seeing friends and family, and it's all, it feels like you're sort of on holiday, but then that kind of wears off and you don't know, you're sort of in a new city, a new place, but then it does sort of plateau out, and you find your new hairdresser and your yoga studio, and you sort of make new friends and connections. So it's important to sort of, I think, know that you're going through that transition period, and know that there's other people out there that have done exactly the same. All of our returners that we speak to have gone through that. I've personally gone through that. So you're not alone in that sort of all those phases of emotions when you come back. So before we wrap up and go into our Q&A, I'd like to ask all of our panelists for their sort of tidbit of advice for our returning Kiwi. So if there was one thing you'd wish you'd known before you left that you can share with our audience today, what would it be? So Ali, we'll start with you.
So I would say don't assume that the New Zealand you left is the New Zealand you're returning to. It will have changed, particularly if you're in Christchurch in the last 10 years. But anywhere in the country it will have changed. So I would say the best bit of advice that I would give to people is come with the mindset as if you're moving to a different country rather than moving home. And then you come with that real curiosity to look for the hairdresser and actually come with that kind of curious intent. That would be my one thing.
That's a great piece of advice, Ali. Kerry, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just from a shipping perspective, I guess, making sure that you understand the importance of doing your due diligence around your options. The cheapest is not always what it seems. Companies have a tendency to hide a lot of costs, or, you know, one shipping method is lower cost than the other, but there's consequential costs that are associated with delays and things. So making sure that you're really considering that. And completely agree with Ali as well. I think when you're coming home, you have to mourn what you've lost in your old location, as well as what you lost because you're not getting what you thought you were coming back to. So just understanding that that's normal and it's a process is good.
Great advice. And Lucy, lastly from you, please.
Well, it's a bit of a variation on the theme, but the one advice I'd say, which also mirrors what we've been discussing, but it's just give it time. How you're feeling at 3 months won't be how you're feeling at 6 months, and then won't be feeling at a year. So when you are going through those points that, you know, we all do, thinking, oh, I wonder what's happening in my old town at the moment, or, you know, there's a festival that you used to go to, or, you know, whatever it is that suddenly makes you think that you, you know, can't just pop over there, then give it some time, because the positives of where you are will build up as well. So be kind to yourself, already said, but just, you know, me personally, so I've been back about 1.5 years now, and really enjoying being back, you know, hitting my stride, I think, and enjoying work a lot more because I'm feeling a bit more comfortable that I can actually do it now. But it is a culture shock, and people maybe aren't expecting that when they're Kiwis and they're coming home, because you think, well, you know, it'll just be the same. But if you've been away for a long time, or if you're coming to New Zealand, not been here before, you know, there is just a bit of a different culture that you, it's great to be excited about, and treat it like an adventure, as Ali said, and treat it as a new country, and just give yourself time to go through that adjustment process.
That's brilliant. Thank you all for sharing that. So now we're going to go into our Q&A. So we'll kick off with some questions that have been submitted from people that haven't been able to join us today because of the time zone, but they have submitted their questions in advance. So Ali, what would your advice be to someone that's recently graduated from university in Scotland and they're beginning to look for jobs in New Zealand with little or no connections after years of being away?
So it's a lot of what I've already said, really. Be curious. So don't be afraid to ask for help. There is so much help out there. People really want to. One of the lovely things about New Zealand is the 2 degrees of separation. And so it won't take long to work out someone who knows someone who knows someone who can help connect you with the right people. So just be curious. I do a wonderful thing called mentor walks, which is women mentoring women, and we walk once every 2 or 3 months for 1.5 hours. And I did one just recently where a woman had signed up for it because she was new to the city and she didn't know anyone, and we ended up connecting her with lots of different people. And, you know, it was just such a creative way to land on your feet. So yeah, be curious and ask for help. Curious and vulnerable, I think, are the 2 things that I would really encourage.
Great, thank you. Kerry, what would your advice be to someone weighing up the pros and cons of shipping their furniture and a car?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. A lot of people do consider bringing their vehicles, and it is certainly a viable option. But what you need to do is just sit down and weigh up the costs. So I think assess the resale value versus the cost to purchase that new, plus obviously the shipping cost, the cost to get that vehicle road compliant. It's likely going to need to be fumigated, and the cost to get a vehicle to tide you over while you're waiting for that vehicle to arrive. So I think that would be a thorough cost assessment which captures all of those elements. And if it's still worthwhile, absolutely do it. Otherwise, you know, ship your household effects here and leave the car at home. There's plenty of secondhand vehicles on the market in New Zealand. We have a really strong secondhand vehicle market, which means you can pick up something for a fairly cost-effective price in most cases.
Great, thank you. Ali, what would your advice be to someone looking to settle their children into the Kiwi culture after being away, or perhaps never living in New Zealand?
So I came back here with 16, well, actually, they were 14-year-old twin boys, and they'd been in an international school in Europe, and it was a real challenge for them, actually. And I'm not being disparaging of the New Zealand education system, but it was a bit of a step backwards. It's very hard to manage the school year sometimes because it's the polar opposite. So they had a very long holiday for a start. But also, I think they were a bit bored. And then they got into all sorts of mischief. So my advice would be think about that really proactively before you come back. Think about how you can, it will be a really big transition for children into whatever school age they are. You know, they're very adaptable, kids are great, but there's never a good time to uproot them. And they're always going to, my experience is they drag their feet going there and then they drag their feet coming back. And then they're really glad in the end that they've done both. So really listen to what your kids are saying, look for those signs, and just make sure you keep them busy when they get back is my kind of learning. I think if I had my time again, that's what I would, keep them busier, because they just got a bit bored because they'd already done a lot of what they were studying at school. So yeah, it's not easy. It's a really challenging thing to do. There's never a good age. They are grateful now, though, I should say that. They really genuinely do say thank you. So who knows?
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. And Kerry, was there anything else that perhaps some of your clients had been aware of that had surprises thrown at them, or, you know, as parents that they could like pre-plan for?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we get a really diverse range of clientele. So a lot of them will be coming from those environments where there are international schools, like where Ali's, you know, sons were attending, and so understanding in advance that actually there aren't any. And New Zealand is often a surprise, although we do offer selected schools will offer an international curriculum. I think, as Ali sort of mentioned, often the curriculum and the basis for it is a lot softer than expats may be used to overseas, and so there's you know, differing views on that, and so it's really important just to speak to the individual school and understand what school's going to offer you the type of education that you think is best for your child. And so a lot of our clients will look at going through the state schooling system. It is of a great standard here, and obviously free, but if you're looking for something else for your child, or you're looking at future-proofing through some of those international curriculum, it might be good to consider expanding your horizons through to the private sector as well. And I think, yeah, just a lot of families coming in might, you know, in terms of getting children settled, really have to look for a lot of those extracurricular activities. And so just making sure that you're getting them involved as much as possible, and you as the parent try and get involved, because often those relationships will stem from from mum or dad meeting other parents as well, and just trying to get them integrated and busy as soon as you can is often a good approach.
Really good advice. Thank you for sharing that. So Lucy, I've got a question for you. How hard do you find it to stay in touch with your friends offshore, and has it been easy to stay connected with your professional and friendship groups back in the UK?
It has been sort of a relatively recent returner. I've actually had a big influx of all of my Kiwi friends that were in London have all come back for this Christmas because it's one of the first Christmases that they can. So it does feel like I've seen everyone a lot. We actually also went back to the UK last year because we had Glastonbury tickets, which we decided that it would be a shame not to use that. So we headed back over as well. I mean, wherever you're coming from in the world, there'll be a time difference, which it just means that instead of texting that friend and saying, do you want to go for a walk or a coffee or meet up after work, it might be a call in the weekend in the morning, or, you know, it's just timing things a bit differently, and maybe it's not quite as spontaneous as it was when you all live in the same city, but hopefully then you build up, you know, your own different friend group in the city you're in, that you can do those last minute things and say, come to this festival or whatever's happening. Yeah, I've found it quite easy to keep in touch with everyone, and we still chat quite a lot, but it can depend on where you are and where your the time you've got, I guess, to put into it. You know, if you put time into maintaining those relationships, then they'll flourish. But if you don't, then that would be harder.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And it certainly is something to sort of navigate when you come back to New Zealand, you know, not having that sort of immediate visibility with friends and family. But I found voice notes are a very good way of sort of still talking to someone and hearing their voice on return, but you know, not having to sort of navigate are you free at 8 a.m. on a Monday when it's my, you know, whatever time. So yeah, that definitely helps. Okay, we've had quite a few questions through for Kerry regarding shipping, which I think most of them have been answered, apart from does Crown have a crib list for returning New Zealanders shipping household goods? I'm not quite sure what a crib list is, so hopefully you do know what that is, Kerry.
But I'm going to pretend it's a list of essential items that you need. So I guess the first the first important thing to understand is that houses in New Zealand do come furnished with carpets, curtains, dishwasher, and stovetops. So a bit different to some countries. Okay, when you rent a property here, important to understand that it's as is where is. So when you go and see that property, apart from the non-fixed furnishings, you get what you get. So they're not going to come in and repaint before you move in. They're not going to come in and replace bench tops before you move in, none of that. But it will come furnished with those items I've listed, as well as light fittings and things as well. So depending on where you're relocating from, if you want to bring your essentials, it would be bedroom furniture, lounge furniture. Depending on where you're coming from, appliances, potentially you need to understand the voltage and the impact that different voltages may have on the lifetime of your appliances. Ability to get plug adapters is not a problem, but the voltage can be a concern. So speak to your relocation provider about that. Our team can definitely help you with advice around whether or not to bring something on a case-by-case basis as well. That's what they're there for. So hopefully that gives a general idea though.
Right. Thank you. And have you experienced any scenarios where goods duty and GST has been exempt due to COVID? For example, waiving the 20-month living outside of New Zealand rule?
Yeah, so there was a period there where they were accepting exemptions, but I think it'd be hard for us to get that through now. A lot of it was based around the volatility with the borders, unable to get MIQ placements, unable to be physically present here when your goods arrive, which facilitates a duty-free clearance. So yes, there have been instances of those types of exceptions, but I think it would be quite challenging to get one now. Because the mitigating circumstances that were in place aren't really there anymore.
Right, thank you. I'm on mute, sorry, I'll start again. Ali, a question for you. Choosing which city to settle in is always a big question for returners. So what do you think are some of the advantages of Christchurch in terms of business opportunity compared to some of the other regions?
Oh, I love whoever asked that question because I get to rave about Christchurch now. There are several. We've got 4 tertiaries. So as I mentioned earlier, there is really good access to talent. It is a relatively lower cost of doing business than in other parts of the country. That's partly because our housing costs are cheaper, our commercial rent costs are cheaper, commutes are shorter. So generally it can be cheaper. And more than anything, I just think it's a place that's got a really thriving startup scene and innovation scene now. So we've actually just jumped up like 168 places in the startup global rankings. So, and that's the biggest jump that anyone's seen for any city across the world. And that's really exciting. There is like a really vibrant, exciting place with this really strong engineering background that's leading to things like the aerospace sector is, forgive the pun, really taking off. So there are lots of great reasons to be here, but there would just be some of the few that come off the top of my head. I'm interested if Lucy, and Kerry, I think you're Christchurch as well.
Yeah, I definitely I feel like it's a really exciting city because there's new things opening up all the time. We've got a great big new sports stadium that's coming. We've got a really big the biggest aquatic centres in Southern Hemisphere, maybe. Great, got that right. Which will be, I think, sort of end of next year is the time frame for that. So, you know, because of what Christchurch has been through, but there are some amazing facilities, and it's been sort of planned. The central city is really thriving, and there's lots of new developments that are still coming in. So, I personally think Christchurch has got a real. It feels kind of young and like it's growing, and that it's an exciting place to be, which it's really great. I'm a bit biased. I've never lived in Auckland, so you know, I can't really do the comparison as much, but I've been really impressed with Christchurch. I hadn't lived in Christchurch either before I came back, and there's lots on. There's usually a wine festival, we had a beer festival, we've got a big music festival next weekend with Lord, Bloom, heaps of, you know, there's some cool stuff that happens in the city actually.
Should give you a job, Lucy.
Yeah, there's definitely a nice vibrancy with Christchurch in the times that I've been in. I think, yeah, to your comment earlier, Ali, about, yeah, Christchurch, you know, what it was 10 years ago, it's very different to, you know, to what it is now. So we've got someone on the call that still doesn't know where they're going to settle and just had a couple of questions about shipping. So they are based in the US, and they were wondering, are there different costs involved with sending from the States to different cities to then store? So Auckland versus Wellington versus New Plymouth, for example. So that's for you, Kerry.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're looking at that scenario of different cities, it's probably important to bear in mind that the majority of shipping lanes from the US now are going to come into Auckland. And so if you're looking outside of Auckland, then there's just going to be some inland transportation, which will change the cost. But it's one to really speak with your relocation provider, because that's evolving all the time. So yes, there is a chance it could change the cost and maybe increase it slightly if you're coming out of that main centre. But if you're going to, you know, New Plymouth, your living cost is going to be fantastic. So give it a go.
Great. And if household effects are in storage, can they pick up some things from the storage facility and leave the rest until it could be delivered to a house?
So normally if you're working with a relocation company, that storage facility is going to be what's referred to as customs bonded, which means that there's no public access to it. However, you can pre-arrange a time to go to that storage unit with someone from the company and go through your storage line. Because there can be costs associated with that, a good approach is actually going through your inventory in advance. So when you start this process, someone will come to your home and complete a survey of your effects. And at that time, you can say to them, well, look, these are really priority items, and I would like these to be, say, at the front of our storage container, so that the relocation company can either deliver them out to you really easily, or you can pop in and pick them up, and there's a minimal cost associated with that. Does it?
Great, thank you. And another audience member has asked, does the required inventory schedule need to include purchase prices for each individual item?
So it depends what you're referring to. If you're talking about insurance, then your relocation provider will probably offer a few different ways to value your effects. And one of those might be a valued inventory. If that's the case, it's really important to make sure everything is on there and you've assigned it a replacement value, as in what it will cost to replace here in New Zealand. You don't want to underinsure because then you won't be compensated appropriately if anything does go wrong. So in that case, yes, you would want to make sure you've listed as much as possible. If you're simply talking about a shipping inventory, then the answer is no. New Zealand doesn't expect that. However, if you do have any items that you are declaring as, say, brand new and unused, which will attract tax and duty, then yes, you will have to potentially apply a value to that, because different duties apply depending on what the actual item is. Okay, so just to go back to the answer to the question, no, you shouldn't have to do that under normal circumstances for your packing inventory.
Great, thank you very much for answering that question. So I think we have answered most of the questions today that have come through, but if there are any other questions that pop up, or if you need help with anything from any of our panelists today, please don't hesitate to reach out. And we can get those answered for you. So firstly, I'd like to say, thank you very much to all of our panelists today for your time helping to answer these questions for our community. We really appreciate your thoughts and you sharing your knowledge with everyone today. And finally, a big thank you to everyone that's joined on our call or will be watching this once it's made available. You'll receive a copy of the recording with details of each speaker, so you can connect in with them, as well as a list of resources to help you plan your move and settle back into life in New Zealand. So wherever you are in the world, have a lovely evening or a lovely day. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon for those in New Zealand, and we look forward to welcoming you back here soon. Haere rā and goodbye for now.